got the notes, this is kind of part 2 of that first oracle, chapters 9 through 11. We broke it right kind of mid-verse, chapter 10, verse 3. So in review, we were looking at, we're here in the 520s, 510s, 510 BC time period. And Zechariah gets this prophecy, and it's a judgment against several cities and kind of former nations, and an encouragement to the nation of Israel. And then as we looked through history, we saw that in 333 BC, we had the Battle of Isis, and that's where the Persian Empire basically meets its end. Persian Empire lasted about 220 years, and that's interesting because how old are we as a nation? We're somewhere around the same, 220, 230. And to us, that might seem like a long time, but this is just kind of a flash in the pan of an empire, because the Roman Empire lasted almost 1,000 years, basically, and they were never conquered. They just kind of dissolved into nothingness, basically. So the Romans were never conquered. So that's just interesting to remember that, hey, we might be this great nation, but so was Medo-Persia. They were this great world power, and they came to naught. Alexander the Great, 333. And then we saw him do this sweeping judgment of all these nations, up, down, and around, and back up and through. And we saw the bypass of Jerusalem. And hopefully you guys had a chance to read that story, that recount by Josephus, that was pretty amazing, of how God preserved Jerusalem through this. He kept his promise, a roughly 200-year-old promise to Zechariah and to the nation of Israel, showing, hey, I am going to judge these nations as he did. Not within that generation, it was in a later generation. And yet preserve Israel through it, and Israel was bolstered. So, we're going to pick it up in chapter 10, verse 3, kind of continuing with Dr. Chisholm's chiastic structure. We're at the bottom half of that chiastic structure. And we'll take it through there all the way, Lord willing, to the end of the chapter. So, picking it up from there, kind of picking it up at, for the Lord of hosts, so that's where we're starting, for the Lord of hosts in verse 3, has visited his flock, the house of Judah, and will make them like his majestic horse in battle. So if you remember the chiastic structure from last week, B was the Lord shepherds his people, right? And so B prime is basically the same thought. The Lord shepherds his people. So you see that emphasis throughout here, right? So here he is shepherding Judah, his flock, the house of Judah, and will make them like a majestic horse in battle. From them will come the cornerstone, from them the tent peg, from them the bow of battle, from them every ruler, all of them together. They will be as mighty men, treading down the enemy in the mire of the streets in battle. And they will fight, for the Lord will be with them, and the riders on the horses will be put to shame. I will strengthen the house of Judah, and I will save the house of Joseph, and I will bring them back, because I have had compassion on them. And they will be as though I had not rejected them, for I am the Lord their God, and I will answer them. Ephraim will be like a mighty man, and their heart will be glad as if from wine. Indeed, their children will see it and will be glad. Their heart will rejoice in the Lord. So great encouragement for it's the nation of Israel. So remember, again, we'll go over this again and again, but northern kingdom was brought into captivity by Assyria, right? And then the southern kingdom lasted a bit longer, and they were brought into captivity by the Babylonians. So they went into captivity as two separate nations. Okay? And part of the calling back is calling them back as a unified nation. So the first encouragement and the first call is to Judah. And Judah would represent which kingdom? The southern kingdom. The southern kingdom of Israel. So the first call is to them, and he's bolstering them for battle, like a war horse. But the question is, why? Why? For the Lord of hosts has visited his flock, right? And will make them like a majestic war horse. So it's because of God. Again, the picture here that's being communicated is God's return, God's acceptance of the nation again, right? Who put them into exile? God did, right? Yes, it was the Assyrians, and yes, it was the Babylonians who did it, but it was God who brought it about. This was God's judgment. So God was the one that rejected. Boom, you're out. And so, who's the one that can call them out again? God. God's the only one that can call them out, and that's what we're seeing. That's what we're seeing here. God is calling them out. And He is bolstering them as for battle, right? Giving them confidence again, giving them that reassurance again, right? All important aspects. When you've been trodden on, your confidence isn't exactly there, right? Not a lot of people get up after a beating. And that's the way these nations have been. But it's God who's calling them back, God who is bolstering them. And look at verse 4. Where does your mind jump when reading a few of these statements? Where do you go? Yeah, right to Jesus, right? Why? Why do you jump to Jesus? You can jump for Jesus too, but He's called the cornerstone. But what about that cornerstone? What happened to that cornerstone? He was rejected. He was the cornerstone that the builders rejected. Right? And the cornerstone was the most important stone. Right? It was the first one they did exact measurements on, because everything was built off of that. The whole building was based off of the cornerstone. And the builders, be the leaders, rejected him. So what does that do? It topples the whole thing, right? That's what happens. So, yeah, this makes us reflect on Christ. From them will come the cornerstone, right? From them the tent peg. It's like, all right, what's this mean? Well, okay, tents back then, you had tents. Here's a nice little tent. Okay, whatever. Not a great drawer. Here's a tent peg. What was the point of the tent peg? Right. That's what held up the tent, right? Without a tent peg, you've got nothing. Your tent's going to fall. So that's what that's getting at. That's why he says that from them, the tent peg. The stability, right? Judah. So we're talking, again, this is in the context of Judah. Judah. From them will come the cornerstone. From them, the tent peg. From them, the bow of battle. Okay, so this would be a strong warrior. Right? Did we see that? And that's why I said, where does your mind jump? Well, you heard cornerstone, you heard tent peg, and your mind jumps to Jesus. Okay. Did we see a warrior in Jesus in the first coming? No. Okay. But what do we know? There's going to be a second coming. He is going to come as a warrior. And he is going to, because look at the last part, from them, every ruler, all of them together. So you go, all right, well, all rulers, all authority. Where is it going to end up? What's going to be the last kingdom? the Messianic kingdom, who's going to be king? Jesus is going to be king. So who's going to be assigning and rooting out and assigning authority and rule? Jesus. That's right. So all quote-unquote kingdoms are going to be from that one kingdom. Okay? It's going to be one Messianic king assigning you guys to this one, you guys to that, right? So eventually all of this is going to come to fruition. And Jesus is associated with what tribe? Judah. That's right. He's the lion from the tribe of Judah. So that's why we get this picture. So not everything. What's confusing is there's going to be some statements in here. Some of them are immediate. Some of them are progressive, as in this generation will see it. Some of them are further out still, as in not this generation, but another generation will see it, and i.e. it's historical to us. And then some statements are future still, meaning it's talking about the coming king, the second coming as Christ reigns, okay? And that's what's going to get screwy in some of these things. That's why Zechariah, for some people, I read through it really quick and say, all right, okay, I'm done. And on to the next book, right? But there's richness here. And so God keeps his promises. Some of them are going to be now, some of them later, and some of them are later still. All right. So moving on. Again, we're keeping in the context of Judah. They will be as mighty men treading down the enemy in the mire of the streets in battle. So that can be both immediate and future still. Meaning, time of the Maccabees, Israel is going to be strengthened, is going to be bolstered, etc. But that doesn't stay that way, does it? They don't stay as a conquering nation. Israel doesn't, right? They end up under the control of Rome, and then Rome basically brings them to naught until 1940s, and they become a nation, and they're still not a world power, right? So that can be both kind of near and far. Those statements. And they will fight. They will fight. Why? For the Lord will be with them. For the Lord will be with them. So this is that reunification that the people are back to Christ or God as the center of their nation. Okay, and we did see that with Zerubbabel and kind of as the people were returning from the exile. But eventually what happened? Just kind of sank back into the old ways. They didn't go to idolatry, did they? Right? When we see the Pharisees, when we pick up with Jesus, they're not an idolatrous nation, are they? They learned their lesson in that venue or in that sense. But instead of truly going to Christ and trusting them as a nation with their hearts, what did they do? Yeah, well, what did they make an idol out of? Themselves and the Word of God. They made an idol out of do this and do that and I can earn it. Yeah, it was the law. That's really what they made an idol out of, was the law. So it was a good idol, but at the end of the day, it was an idol. It wasn't God. And that's why they were blinded when God himself stood in front of them. No, we're around here. We're going to uphold the law. We're going to follow God. All right. Well, you better know this God. They didn't know this God. So, eventually, and that's why this is still something yet still, eventually this nation, Israel, will embrace Christ. They'll embrace God wholeheartedly again. And they will be literally one nation under God. It'll be a theocracy again, as it was before they went into the whole, we want a king. We want a king. You want a king? I'll give you a king, just like you want. And they got Saul, and trouble started. All right. So I'll strengthen the house of Judah. I will save the house of Joseph. Okay, what tribe is Joseph? Right, it is the northern. But when you say Joseph, there is no tribe of Joseph. What does Joseph represent, though? Ephraim and Manasseh. Ephraim and Manasseh. There you go. Those were his sons, right? And those are the two half tribes. So, Ephraim and Manasseh are being represented here. So, what's he saying? He's not talking yet about bolstering them. That'll come later, though. He says, what will he do to Joseph? What will he do? And I will what the house of Joseph? I will save the house of Joseph. Okay. That's different, isn't it? If you're talking about saving, you're talking about bringing out, right? So this can not only be the call out of exile, but it can also be, much bigger spiritual sense, would be what? Salvation. Salvation, right? Where does true obedience come from? A changed heart. A changed heart. Who's really going to follow God? A person that's truly been saved. That's where true obedience comes from, right? You can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig, right? You got to change the heart. I will save Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh. Now we're talking about the northern kingdom. And I will bring them back, there's the call out of exile, because I have had compassion on them. Who here, if you have been saved, is not a trophy to God's compassion? Right? If you are saved, you are a trophy of God's compassion, God's mercy, God's pity for us. And they will, as though I had not rejected them, for I am the Lord. I am the Lord, their God. And I will answer them. I will respond. It's as if they're praying, Lord, bring us back. Right? And the only reason why they would pray to God, Lord, bring us back, would be from a changed heart. And a repentant one, right? That's what sent them into exile in the first place. You know, we're strong, we're mighty, we're all that, chest thump. And God humbles them, sends them into exile. And we see in Daniel, we see him pray, Lord, you know, we've sinned. And we repent, we turn, Lord, please bring us back. And here's God answering the call. Why? Because he is who he is. For I am the Lord. I am the Lord, their God. Right? He is God. Verse 7, don't miss it. Ephraim will be like a mighty man. So now we get the bolstering of the northern kingdom. All right? We already had Judah. We had this kind of descriptive language, the energizing, if you will, of the southern kingdom and Judah. Now Ephraim. So make sure that you lock in on that. That's the context we are in. Ephraim, northern kingdom, because that's going to save you some confusion as we read on. All right, so Ephraim will be like a mighty man, and their heart will be glad as if from wine. So, you know, back in the day, that would be representative of a person would drink, and what they do, they get happy, quote unquote, and drunk. But it's not advocating drunkenness, it's just saying as if, right? So it's allegorical in the sense that they are happy and encouraged and joyful. Indeed, their children will see it and be glad, right? This restoration. Their heart will rejoice in what? In the Lord. So where does their joy come from? The Lord, right? Does this sound a lot like a psalm that says, the what of the what is my strength? Good, there you go. The joy of the Lord is my strength. Rejoicing in God, and therein lies the strength. So you see the connection there? You see it? He said, I'm going to bolster them, I'm going to strengthen them. And the joy is, the rejoicing comes from their relationship with God. So this is, it's speaking of, representing, painting the picture of a nation that is embracing God again. and they're embracing God, and God is calling them back. All right, so verse 8, going into the next part, and this is going to finish off Chisholm's chiastic structure. So now we're into C prime, right? C prime. And I will whistle for them. I will whistle for them to gather them together, for I have redeemed them, and they will be as numerous as they were before. When I scattered them among the peoples, they will remember me in far countries, and they, with their children, will live and come back. And I will bring them back from the land of Egypt and gather them from Assyria, and I will bring them into the land of Gilead and Lebanon until no room can be found for them. And they will pass through the seas of distress, and he will strike the waves in the sea, so that all the depths of the Nile will dry up, and the pride of Assyria will be brought down, and the scepter of Egypt will depart. And I will strengthen them in the Lord, and in his land, and in his name they will walk, declares the Lord. We'll stop at that point because there's a discussion point that's going to bring us to this divider in chapter 11. But so we see God, I will, right? So this is God speaking. I will for them. I will whistle for them. All right? So the picture is a shepherd. It's a shepherd picture. Not a dog. Okay, that's our culture. Come here, Fido. That wasn't their culture. Their culture was sheep. And he would whistle for the sheep, right? And the sheep would there could be a dog driving the sheep and pushing them in a direction, but the whistling was for the sheep, right? What do we see? We're studying the 23rd Psalm, and we're learning about a shepherd, and that's reflective of John 10. And Christ says, my sheep hear my voice, right? So a part of that voice was the whistle. They knew his whistle. You know, well, dogs respond to it. You're thinking that sheep can't. They can. They're dumb, yes, but they learn a few things. Kids can't, usually not. Come here, kids. All right. All right. So, but if you're whistling, what are you doing? Calling. Come here. Right? So this to an exiled nation is what? Come out of exile. Come where? Back to Jerusalem, back to Israel. But the call here is to keep it in the context, Ephraim, the northern kingdom. All right? I will gather them together, for I have redeemed them. Redemption. Right? So this isn't just because I'm calling them. He's saying, I've redeemed them. What's redemption? It is a picture of salvation. To buy back, right? Buy back, right? To buy back. And that's, of course, God and Israel. There's a picture of salvation in that, right? Because he redeemed us, not with corruptible things, such as silver and gold, right? But with the precious blood of Jesus. So redemption is buying back, right? Price is paid, right? That's the picture of redemption. There is a price to be paid, and that price must be paid. The price is paid, and I claim you. That's redemption. Okay? So God has said the price is paid in suffering and in their exile. They paid for it. Yep. Now I'm calling you back. Calling you back because he's the covenant-keeping God, right? He hasn't broken his promise to them. Calling them back, I'll redeem them, and they will be as numerous as they were before. So he's saying the nation's going to again explode. When I scatter them among the peoples. So the language here, does anybody have a different translation for when I scatter them among the nations? Sow them. And that's a better understanding, right? Because when you think of scatter in our culture, if you're scattering, it sounds like kind of a judgment type of thing. I'm going to scatter you. But if you think of I'm going to sow, what is that now? Yeah, I'm placing you. All right? And I'm putting you among the peoples or among the nations, right? said, I'm putting you everywhere. And it says, and they will remember me in far countries, and they with their children will live and come back. So, what are we talking about? Well, this can be a near or far. Meaning, are they currently scattered among the nations? They sure are. They sure are. But it says, when I scatter them among the peoples. And see, some translations say, or when I sow them. To sow is not sowed, right? Get the tense of the verb, right? If I sowed, what would that be? Past tense, right? If I sow, it's present tense. It's what I'm doing, right? The time of Zechariah, has everybody returned to Jerusalem? No, not everybody's back yet. But are some people back? We've had the first back, right? Is there going to be more waves going back? Yes. So, what's going on? Where are the people? They're sowed among the nations. They're all out there still. So this is still something yet to come. All right? And he says, I'm going to call them back and I'm going to make them a nation. I'm going to make you strong again. Okay. And that did happen. But did they ever come to the strength of world prominence again? No, they didn't. So it can be a far context too. Because one day, will they rise to world prominence? Yeah, they will. With God, with Christ at the throne. That will happen. So there's a near context, there's a far context. And so I'll sow them, and they will remember me in far countries. And again, this is going to be near and far. But what happens when they call them back? Why do they want to come back? To worship God, to be with God. It's a heart change. Lord, I want you. I want to come back. Come back to the place or the nation of promise, to the place that you called us. And they will remember me. Not in the sense of, I just thought of God today, right? It isn't that. This thought here in remembering is a longing, right? Greg's over there in the island country and you remembered your wife. You didn't say, well, I remember Chris. I remember her. Right? No, you remember your wife and that you long to be with her again and reunite, right? So, yeah. So there you go. I think he still would even if you weren't here, Chris. And they will be numerous as they were before. In other words, they're going to be populous again, strength in numbers. They will live and they will come back. So they with their children will live and come back. So they'll return. And I will bring them back from the land of Egypt and gather them from Assyria, and I will bring them into the land of Gilead and Lebanon. So here's the thing. We're using some picturesque type language. First of all, what's the context? Who are we talking about? Northern Kingdom, Ephraim. Who dragged them into exile? Assyria. Okay, so if we were talking in the context of national Israel, it was Assyria and Babylon, right? And so if we were thinking in terms of who dragged them into exile, we would want to see in this list from Egypt, from Assyria, from Babylon. But we don't see Babylon. Well, that's because that's not the context. This is Ephraim. Okay? And we're using some language here that's descriptive of being in captivity and coming out. What's Israel's biggest, memorial of being in captivity was where? Egypt. That's right. So we're using language to describe being in captivity and being called out. So that's what's being pictured, and I'm going to gather them from Assyria. All right? So he says land of Egypt, because we're making a picture, but then I'm going to gather them from Assyria. That was the nation that dragged them into exile, the northern kingdom. All right? And I will bring them into the land of Gilead and Lebanon. I don't know, what does that mean? You're going to get my great drawings again. Jordan River, woo! Land, I can't remember which is which, but Gilead and Lebanon. That's the way that works. It's both sides of the Jordan, okay? So he's calling them into the land. You like my geography, my geographic picture? So that's what he's describing, as if it's not just one side, it's both sides. Meaning they're taking up a lot of space, right? And that's what we're trying to convey here. Until no room can be found for them. See? You see the thought there? Yes?
Sort of like call to because at one point they did have both sides, Reuben and Gad, so they had one side of the Jordan and then the other tribes on the other side. So it's kind of like a restoration of that.
Good. So you ask, okay, so you're asking, is it a part of that restoration for the northern kingdom? Yes, it is, right? The main thought here is volume, is more the population. Like it's not just one side, it's both sides. Yeah. But yeah, I'm sure that would be in view too, that they're being restored their original areas, the northern kingdom is. So yeah, that's good question and good thought. Yes, absolutely. And they will pass through the sea of distress. All right. Again, keeping within the motif of Egypt, what did they do? They passed through the Red Sea. Was that a tenuous situation? Absolutely, right? They had Egypt on their heels. They thought that they were dead in the water, figuratively and literally. And they're here, we're stuck. God parts the seas and they walk through on dry land. So that's picturesque of walking through diversity and a sea of distress, and he will strike down the waves in the sea. So, meaning so they're going through much travail. They're making their way back, is the picture. But who is preserving them getting back? God is, right? So remember, God's behind this restoration. So the picture is that he's the one calling them back. He's the one preserving them as they are going, right? All the way through. So it's not going to be easy, and the people knew that when they're called back. Why did people stay and say, well, that's all right, I'm not going to go? Why did they stay? Yeah, they're content. And is it going to be an easy road back? No, it wasn't going to be an easy road back. I'm happy where I am. Forget it. I'm not going to take the hard road back. And God's calling them back, and he's saying, I'm going to preserve you in returning. Okay? Reflect upon your own lives. See if that makes a lot of sense, because there's something that'll preach right there. Saying God calls us to things that sometimes are very difficult to go through, but he says, it's okay. I will be with you through it. But obey me and get up off your duff and go. Right? That might be geographically speaking, or it might just be decision speaking. Obey me. Obey me. It's going to be hard. It's going to be tough. There's going to be trials. I know, but I'm with you. That's the promise. So that all the depths of the Nile will dry up. Okay? And the Nile would be associated with Egypt. And the pride of Assyria will be brought down, and the scepter of Egypt will depart. So there is judgment language being spoken of here to what nations? Assyria and Egypt. Because they were involved in the distribution and judgment of the northern kingdom. And they were the problem children, geographically speaking. If we've got the northern kingdom and Israel right in here, who was north? Assyria. Who was south? Egypt. They were problem children for these guys. They created issues. And God's saying, I'm going to judge them. We've got judgment language here in verse 11. And then verse 12, and I will strengthen them in the Lord, and in his name they will walk, declares the Lord. So again, the strength that is being spoken of time and time again is associated with God and not a physical, we're all that and we're all a bunch of big, strong Arnold Schwarzenegger type of guys. It has to do with their relationship with God, right? And so the restoration of that relationship, that's their strength. And that's the way God wants us to live our lives, right? My strength is not my own. It's because of the Lord. So, we're going to jump into chapter 11. All right, there's a little point of contention here in chapter 11. These first 3 verses can go with the end of chapter 10, meaning because what's in these first 3 verses is judgment language. This is judgment language. Okay, so that's not the debate, whether or not this is judgment. It's a judgment. The question is the judgment on Assyria and Egypt, or is the judgment on Israel? And guess what? You've got brilliant commentators on both sides. Okay? So, meaning whichever side you go, there are brilliant men on the other side of it. Dr. Chisholm makes a pretty compelling argument that verses 1 through 3 is continuing the judgment of Egypt and Assyria. Why? Well, you've got it in your notes. He makes this statement. Oh, it's at the top of page 4 in your notes. It says, Isaiah used the cedars of Lebanon and the oaks of Bashan to symbolize the proud objects of divine judgment. Isaiah compared Assyria to the trees of Lebanon, and Ezekiel pictured both Assyria and Egypt as the great trees in Lebanon. So Chisholm makes the association that the judgment language here is continuing the thought of Egypt and Assyria. So I tend to agree with him just because it flows better from, we're talking about judging Egypt and Assyria. We just saw that in verse 11 of chapter 10. And we were talking about the encouragement of Israel. So the people, to be fair, to give you the other side, the way the other commentators think is these first 3 verses are a judgment call to Israel because we're talking about the kind of the same type of locations, Lebanon, right? We just mentioned Lebanon and Gilead, but we don't see both. We just see Lebanon and we see Bashan, and that geographic area where he's called the northern kingdom into. And there's this judgment language, and the way the commentators think of it is saying there's going to be this judgment because of verses 4 and following pictures the rejection of the Messiah. All right, so there will be a judgment for the rejection of the Messiah, and that's true. That does happen, by the way. But we see that same type of judgment language later on in chapter 11. So you go either way, you're not going to be completely wrong. This is a judgment call. But like I said, I lean a little more towards agreeing with Dr. Chisholm that verses 1 through 3 is a call to judgment against Egypt and Assyria. So open the doors, O Lebanon, that the fire may feed on your cedars. So the burning down, picturing the burning down of a forest. Wail, O cypress, for the cedar has fallen, because the glorious trees have been destroyed. Wail, O oaks of Bashan, for the impenetrable forest has come down. Again, this is good judgment language, right? Assyria was very proud. Who's ever going to conquer us? And did they get the eye poke. There is a sound. There's the sound of the shepherd's wail, right? Because if all the green grass and all the forest area has all been chewed up, where do you keep your sheep? There's no place left. So that would be the cry of the shepherd because of this great judgment. There is the sound of the young lion's roar. Lions are a symbol of confidence used throughout the Proverbs. If the Proverbs 28:1, the wicked flee when no one pursues, but the righteous are as bold as a lion. So the lion's used as a picture of confidence. And so this would be confidence shaken, right? So a lion doesn't have a home, right? For the pride, not arrogance, but the pride would be a group of lions of the Jordan is ruined. So it's just a judgment, a complete and utter judgment. Were Assyria and Egypt judged? You betcha, folks. And a part of that was Alexander the Great, that pretty much kind of ended both Assyria and Egypt as far as being anything of any type of world power. Even to this day, Egypt, though a country, is just kind of an afterthought to most people. Very poor country. So that's the judgment language. So jumping into 11:4, not to spend too much time on it because we've got 10 minutes. Thus says the Lord my God. This is another reason why I lean towards Dr. Chisholm, because there seems to be a clean break in thought here. We've got a new declaration in verse 4. Thus says the Lord my God, pasture the flock doomed to slaughter. The call is to who? Verse 4 would be a call to who? Okay. It would be a call to, he says, who's writing the book? Zechariah, right? This is a call to Zechariah, and he is supposed to take on himself a shepherding role. Okay? So it's a call to him. Look what he says. Thus says the Lord my God. And he says, Yahweh Elohim. All right? Covenant-keeping God, Yahweh. Elohim, God, Creator God. And he's whose God? Whose God? My God. My God. Right? So that's a relational thing. Remember, we talked about this last time. Whenever King Saul referred to God, he would say to Samuel, the Lord, your God. When David talked about God, he would say, the Lord, my God. Right? That's a relationship. That's a personal relationship. And Zechariah affirms that and is very reverential and very respectful in the way he refers to God. Yes, he's our Father, but do not ill-respect him. He is to be respected as, yes, the covenant-keeping, great creator of the ends of the universe, God. Right? So remember who you're talking to. And it came at a great cost that you can enter in and boldly approach that throne, but respect that throne. Right? Respect that throne. And that's the way he's approaching. And so God's calling, he says, shepherd the flock. Well, that's tough enough. Greg can even speak to this, brother. It's tough to shepherd a flock. Right? Now, what about a doomed flock? What about a doomed flock that's doomed for the slaughter? Boy, that's a shot in the arm. Thanks. Could you imagine being called as a pastor if God verbally said, I want you to go and pastor this church, and it will hate you, and it will reject you, and I'm going to bake it. Thank you? That'd be a tough call, right? That's what he's calling him to. Verse 5 says, those who buy them slay them, them being the sheep, and go unpunished. And each of those who sell them say, blessed be the Lord, for I have become rich. And their own shepherds have no pity on them. So we get three separate groups. One would be the seller, the person that gets the flock. A possible fill-in for this would be Rome. In 70 AD, they go in, march in, roll over Jerusalem, and who says boo about it? No, nobody. Romans, they do as they please, and they don't, it appears they just get away with it. Now, ultimately, no. But that would be that kind of person. They go unpunished. Each of those sells them says, "Blessed be the Lord, for I become rich." This reference is basically a mocking of God. And there's a lot of nations that actually fall into this category, even currently. And it's just, it's a slap in the face to Israel and ultimately to God. But a slap in the face to Israel. Oh, your God's made me rich. I'm doing great in selling you off, making sure that you get taken care of, right? And then you get their last reference. And their own shepherds have no pity on them. Who would be the shepherds? The prophets, the priests, the kings, right? No pity. So that means they don't care what's happening. Oh yeah, sure, pick it up. Go take it. And then verse 6, this is the ultimate. "For I will no longer have pity on the inhabitants of the land, declares the Lord. But behold, I will cause the men to fall, each into another's power, and into the power of his king, and they will strike the land, and I will not deliver them from their power." So this is a huge judgment. And it's a judgment on the flock, i.e. Israel. And the question is left, why? Weren't we talking about, rainbows and unicorns just a few minutes ago? Yeah, it was great. And now it's judgment. Why? Why? Well, we get our why. Verse 7, "So I pastured the flock," Zechariah, "doomed to slaughter. Hence the afflicted of the flock, and I took for myself 2 staffs." And this is definitely a picture, right? Because what did a shepherd have? A what and a what? A rod and a staff, right? We just went over this. This would be fresh in your minds. A rod and a staff. It's not 2 staffs, right? But so we're creating a picture, an image. I'm going to take 2 staffs. All right. One I called favor and the other I called union. So I pastured the flock, right? Okay, favor and union. God's favor had returned to Israel. We were just talking about that. And unity had returned to Israel, right? Because both of the northern and southern kingdoms are being called back. Got favor, got unity. So I pastured the flock. Then I annihilated the 3 shepherds in 1 month. So I'm going to say it was a lot of time. There's about 41 different interpretations on this. So we're not going to discuss them all because it's not probable. The most common of the estimates of what the 3 are probably prophet, priest, and king, right? All the forms of leadership. And he's saying, I wiped them all out. Hence the afflicted of the flock. And I took for myself, then I annihilated the 3 shepherds in 1 month, for my soul was impatient with them, right? They're not leading correctly. They're not guiding correctly. And their soul also was weary of me. So there's some imagery here. I'm getting rid of them. They didn't like me, right? So prophet, priest, king, rejection of the shepherd. So remember, this is Zechariah, but Zechariah is creating an image, right? He's not literally taking 2 staffs. He's not literally going out with a bunch of sheep, is he? This is a picture. And he's got union and he's got favor. And he, as the shepherd, says, I'm getting rid of all leadership, but that leadership is rejecting me. Is this sounding at all familiar of what this might be picturing? Who might this be picturing? The Christ, the Messiah, right? Because what happened? He came in, right? God incarnate. And what do the leaders do? The scribes, the Pharisees, the king. What was the first step? They all rejected him, right? Good King Herod. Here's about the birth of the king of Israel. What's he want to do? He wants to kill him. right? And the Pharisees and the scribes, they reject him, right? Prophet, priests, and king, rejection of the leader of Israel, all right? For their soul. Then I said, I will not pasture you. What is to die, let it die. What is to be annihilated, let it be annihilated. And let those who are left eat one another's flesh. And so it's a judgment. You know what happened in 70 AD when the Romans came in? Cannibalism happened. This actually happened. So there's a judgment that's to be taken place. Why? Because of the rejection of the shepherd. And I took my staff favor and I cut it in pieces to break my covenant which I had made with all of the peoples. So it was broken on that day, and thus the afflicted of the flock who were watching me realized that it was the word of the Lord. This is all a fulfillment. Because who were the ones that agonized over the death of the Christ? The ones who had their eyes open. Right? The afflicted of the flock. The ones who would also otherwise be rejected. His disciples. The women of Israel wept. Right? But the rulers, of Israel were joyous, right? Get this guy out of here. He's horning in on our territory. People aren't listening to us. We need to get rid of this guy. And they killed the King of Glory. And I said to them, here we go. It is good. It is good in your sight. Give me my wages. But if not, never mind. So they weighed out 30 shekels of silver as my wages. Sounding familiar? And then the Lord said to them, throw it to the potter, that magnificent price at which I was valued by them. So I took the 30 shekels of silver and threw them to the potter in the house of the Lord. Anybody, is this connecting with anybody? This is exactly what happened. And this is why this prophecy in Zechariah is looked back on. What happened? Judas sells him out. What's the price? 30 pieces of silver. What does Judas do with it? He feels bad, goes back. He says, I killed the Christ. I feel horrible. What is that to us? What's he do with the money? He chucks it where? Into the temple. He chucks it back to him. And they go, what? Oh, we can't just let this sit here. We got to do something. So what do? They buy a field. What's the name of the field? The potter's field. This is fulfilled almost 600 years later in the Christ. But look at the way he says that magnificent price. This is the price of a gored servant, right? If your animal gored somebody else's servant to death, you paid them 30 pieces of silver. What a great price. Is a gored servant is just, they're replaceable. Here's 30 pieces of silver. Have at it, right? That's why he mocks the price tag put on this magnificent price. And he throws it. And then I cut in pieces my second staff union to break the brotherhood between Judah and Israel. And that was true of Israel in 70 AD, is the contention between that northern and southern kingdom arose again. The unity just dissolved, as did the nation. It broke. Just like what's being pictured here. And the Lord said to them, and the Lord said to me. Okay, so you get it? You get what? So there's judgment on Israel to be because of their future rejection of the Messiah. Okay, they're going to reject him. They will be judged for it. We see that. All right, here we're going to take another jump, last few verses here, 15 to 17. The Lord said to me, take again for yourself the equipment of a foolish shepherd. Okay, so again, he's going to picture a shepherd, but this time it's a different one, not a faithful one. For behold, I am going to raise up a shepherd in the land who will not care for the perishing, seek the scattered, heal the broken, or sustain the one standing. He's not going to do any of that. But will devour the flesh of the fatted sheep and tear off their hooves. Cruel. And he's going to be cruel to who? Israel. And yet, this is God raising up a shepherd. Okay, so a shepherd is representative of what? A leader. So it's a leader that God is raising up, and this leader is going to abuse Israel. Who does this sound like? Go ahead and say it a little louder. The Antichrist. That's right. The Antichrist, right? Because we just got a picture of the Christ, the shepherd, good shepherd, and now we're going to get the antithesis of that shepherd. Woe to the worthless shepherd who leaves the flock. A sword will be on his arm and on his right eye. His arm will be totally withered and his right eye will be blinded. So this is the judgment on that shepherd. The cutting of the arm would be the elimination of strength, and the removal of the eye would be associates with intelligence, right? The all-seeing eye, you've got it on your dollar bill, representative of intelligence or knowledge, right? So this Antichrist will be brought to naught. Do we see that? Not here, but do we see that in, let's say, Revelation? Will the Antichrist be judged and ultimately be brought powerless? Yes. Yes. And so this is a judgment, again, saying there will be a judgment on the worthless shepherd. So that kind of, what a downer to leave it in. Okay, we're going to be judged. But it's a warning to Israel. Open your eyes, look for this Christ, look for the good shepherd, be wary of the foolish shepherd. And this in general would be a warning to them. Should they, as a nation, care about who's leading them? Yeah, they should, right? They should care about that, and they should care about following God. And the theme that I don't know if you picked up on it or not, that occurred over and over and over and over again was the joy and rejoicing and strength and all of that is found in a relationship with God, right? In a relationship with God. And that's what they should be pursuing. That's what they should be pursuing, right? And they didn't do it, right? They didn't do it. But as 1 Corinthians 10 tells us, they're an example to us. They're an example to us that we don't do the same type of thing, right? Because we can go down that exact same road and reject the one true God and not follow him and not listen to his word, right? Or we can embrace him in a true relationship. He'll change us, change our hearts, and we'll find our joy and our strength in him. Okay, we're over time. Let's go ahead and close in prayer.